The name Irene Ryan may not immediately ring a bell for younger audiences, but for millions of fans across America, she will forever be remembered as the unforgettable Granny from the Beverly Hillbillies. With her quick wit, sharp tongue, and endless energy, Ryan transformed the role of Daisy Mae Moses into one of television's most beloved characters. Yet behind the laughter and the iconic performances, Irene's real life told a very different story. One marked by heartbreak, quiet struggles, and a tragic end that left her fans in tears. Born in Texas in 1902, Ryan's rise to fame was anything but easy. She worked tirelessly for decades in vaudeville, radio, and theater before finally finding stardom on television in her 60s. To the outside world, her success seemed like a dream come true, proof that perseverance could overcome the odds. But the woman behind Granny carried a lifetime of personal disappointments and silent battles that few ever knew about. By the time the Beverly Hillbillies made her a household name, Irene was already facing health issues, and her private life was far lonelier than the audiences who adored her could imagine. She never had children, endured 2 failed marriages, and often found herself struggling with the realities of being a woman in Hollywood who had waited so long for recognition. And then came the final blow. Her career ended abruptly due to devastating illness, and her last days were far from the glamorous world of show business. Irene Ryan's story is not just one of laughter, but of resilience and tragedy, reminding us that even the brightest stars sometimes carry the heaviest burdens. Irene Ryan's life began far from the glittering world of Hollywood. She was born Jessie Irene Noblet on October 17, 1902. In El Paso, Texas. Her early years were modest, shaped by a family that valued hard work but had little connection to the entertainment industry. From a young age, Irene was drawn to performance, finding joy in singing and making people laugh. That spark would guide her entire life, even when the road was difficult. As a teenager, she discovered vaudeville, the vibrant mix of comedy, song, and dance that dominated American entertainment in the early 20th century. Irene's small stature and expressive face made her a natural on stage, and by her late teens, she was already working as a performer. She teamed up with comedian Tim Ryan, whom she later married, and the two became a successful vaudeville duo known as Tim and Irene. Their act gained attention nationwide, blending slapstick comedy with musical numbers that showcased Irene's wit and timing. The duo's success brought them to radio and eventually to film. Throughout the 1930s and 1940s, Irene appeared in short films and supporting roles, often cast as a lively, sharp-tongued woman who could steal a scene with just a look or a line. Yet despite her talents, stardom always seemed just out of reach. While other actresses of her time became household names, Irene remained on the edges of fame. Working steadily but never breaking through to the level she dreamed of, her personal life was equally complicated. Irene's marriage to Tim Ryan ended in divorce after years of strain. She later married again, but that union also failed. Childless and navigating a male-dominated industry that favored younger faces, Irene often buried her disappointments under her tireless work ethic. She took on whatever roles came her way, never losing her passion for performing, even as the industry seemed to overlook her. But the 1960s would change everything. At an age when most actresses were pressured to step away from the screen, Irene found herself landing the role that would define her career forever. Cast as Daisy Mae Granny Moses on the Beverly Hillbillies, she suddenly became one of television's most recognizable faces. Her transformation into the feisty, no-nonsense Granny, with her quick comebacks and fiery spirit, was nothing short of magical. Audiences fell in love with her immediately. The show was a runaway hit, drawing tens of millions of viewers each week, and Granny quickly became one of its most beloved characters. For Irene, after decades of chasing success, the role was a dream come true. Yet even as she finally basked in the spotlight, the personal struggles she carried never fully left her. Fame had arrived, but happiness was still fleeting. This sharp contrast between Irene's late-in-life success and the private heartaches that lingered behind the scenes would define her story in ways the public never truly saw. And as her health began to falter in the years that followed, The tragedy of her life became painfully clear. When the Beverly Hillbillies premiered in 1962, no one could have predicted just how massive a cultural phenomenon it would become. The sitcom, built around the story of a poor rural family that strikes oil and suddenly finds itself living among the wealthy elite of Beverly Hills, was an instant hit. At the heart of it all was Irene Ryan, cast as Daisy Mae Moses, better known as Granny. Granny was fiery, stubborn, and endlessly entertaining. Whether she was cooking up her rheumatism medicine, chasing off unwanted suitors, or butting heads with city folk, she quickly became a fan favorite. Irene's sharp comedic timing, physical energy, and ability to deliver a punchline with perfect precision transformed Granny into one of television's most iconic characters. Week after week, millions of viewers tuned in, laughing at her antics and marveling at the chemistry she brought to the screen. For Irene, the role was nothing short of life-changing. After decades of working in vaudeville, radio, and small film roles, she had finally found the part that showcased her full talents. What made her performance even more remarkable was that she was in her 60s when the show began, an age when most actresses were pressured out of leading roles. Instead, Irene proved that talent could shine at any stage of life, and she reveled in the belated recognition she had waited so long to achieve. Behind the scenes, however, Irene's life was far more complicated than her television success suggested. While she loved the show and cherished the laughter it brought her fans, she often returned home to an empty house. Twice divorced and with no children, Irene's personal life lacked the stability and companionship many of her peers enjoyed. She poured herself into her work, and for years it was enough to sustain her. Still, fame came with its own challenges. Irene sometimes felt typecast by her role, and though she was grateful for Granny, she longed for opportunities that would allow her to stretch as an actress beyond comedy. Yet she rarely complained, always showing up on set with energy and professionalism. Her co-stars often remarked that she was the glue of the cast, the one who kept spirits high and gave her best even on the toughest days. What audiences didn't know was that Irene was also battling health issues. The relentless schedule of filming a hit series, combined with her age, began to take a toll on her physically. Still, she refused to slow down. Her dedication to her craft and to her fans pushed her to keep performing, even when exhaustion or illness set in. By the late 1960s, Irene Ryan was at the height of her career. The Beverly Hillbillies had made her a household name, and she was beloved by millions. But behind the scenes, her body was beginning to betray her, and her personal loneliness grew harder to ignore. She had finally achieved fame and financial security, yet the life she had dreamed of, filled with family, love, and stability, continued to elude her. As the show wound down in the early 1970s, Irene faced the reality of what was to come. And though she still had the will to perform, the health problems she had long pushed aside would soon catch up with her in a devastating way. By the early 1970s, Irene Ryan had achieved what so many actors dreamed of, television immortality through her role as Granny on the Beverly Hillbillies. Yet as the cameras stopped rolling after the show's cancellation in 1971, Irene faced a new reality: life after Granny. Though she remained a beloved figure, typecasting limited her opportunities, and the physical toll of years of relentless work began to surface in ways she could no longer ignore. Still, Irene wasn't one to sit still. Determined to continue performing, she transitioned to the stage, where her energy and comedic timing continued to shine. In 1972, she landed the role of Berta in the Broadway musical Pippin. The production was a hit, and Irene's performance delighted audiences who had grown up watching her on television. Many critics praised her ability to reinvent herself, showing that she was more than Granny. She was a versatile entertainer who could command the stage with both humor and heart. But behind her radiant stage presence, Irene's health was deteriorating rapidly. Friends and colleagues noticed her increasing fatigue, but she kept pushing forward, insisting that the show must go on. Then, during a live performance of Pippin, Irene suddenly collapsed on stage. The audience at first thought it was part of the act, but the truth was far more serious. Irene had suffered a stroke. Though she managed to finish the performance that night, it was clear that something was terribly wrong. Doctors soon discovered that Irene was suffering from a malignant brain tumor, along with arteriosclerosis, a condition that restricts blood flow. For the woman who had spent her life making audiences laugh, the diagnosis was devastating. She was forced to leave Pippin and step away from the work that had defined her entire existence. Even in her illness, Irene showed the same resilience that had carried her through years of disappointment and hard work. She never complained publicly about her condition, and instead expressed gratitude for the opportunities she had been given. To her close friends, however, it was clear that the loneliness of her personal life and the cruel timing of her illness weighed heavily on her. She had finally found recognition and respect in her career, only to have it cut short by tragedy. In her final months, Irene was cared for by loved ones and colleagues who admired her strength. Yet she spent much of her time reflecting on her life, the marriages that hadn't lasted, the children she never had, and the years she had struggled for success. Though she cherished her fans, her private life was marked by a sense of incompleteness, as if she had given everything to her art but received little comfort in return. On April 26, 1973, Irene Ryan passed away at the age of 70. News of her death shocked fans across the nation. For many, Granny had felt like part of their own family, and her sudden loss was deeply felt. Letters and tributes poured in, celebrating not only her unforgettable role on the Beverly Hillbillies, but also her decades of dedication to entertainment. Her passing left a void in Hollywood and among her fans, a reminder of how fragile even the brightest stars can be. Irene had spent her entire life making people laugh, but her final chapter was defined by illness and heartbreak. Though Irene Ryan's death in 1973 marked the end of her life, it was far from the end of her story. Her legacy, both as a comedian and as a woman who fought her way to the top in an unforgiving industry, continues to resonate with audiences who remember her not just for Granny, but for the resilience and warmth she brought to everything she touched. For most fans, Irene will always be Granny from the Beverly Hillbillies. The role was iconic, one of those rare performances that defined an era of television. Clad in her apron, hair tied back, and with a fiery spark in her eyes, Granny became the heart of the show. She wasn't just comic relief. She embodied family, tradition, and the clash between old-world simplicity and modern extravagance. Even today, reruns of the series remind audiences of Irene's impeccable timing and ability to steal every scene she was in. But Irene's legacy extended beyond television. Her work on the stage, particularly in Pippin, showcased a side of her talent that many casual fans never saw. She proved that she could sing, dance, and deliver a performance that stood alongside Broadway's finest. Her collapse on stage and the illness that followed were heartbreaking because they cut short a second act in her career that was just beginning to blossom. For many in the theater community, she remains a symbol of courage and artistry, remembered not just for her television fame, but for her refusal to give up on performing even as her body betrayed her. Beyond the applause and the spotlight, Irene's story resonates because it is deeply human. She experienced the loneliness that often comes with fame. She went through 2 marriages that didn't last. She never had children, a fact that sometimes left her longing for a different kind of family life. And yet she filled that emptiness by dedicating herself to her craft and to her fans. In her own way, Irene lived for the laughter of others, finding purpose in bringing joy even when her private life wasn't always joyful. Her death at the relatively young age of 70 was a reminder of how fleeting success and life itself can be. Fans mourned her not only because they loved Granny, but because they sensed the bittersweet truth. Irene had given the world so much and deserved more time to enjoy the recognition she had worked for all her life. Today, Irene Ryan's name still carries weight in Hollywood history. The Irene Ryan Acting Scholarship, established by the Kennedy Center American College Theater Festival, continues to support aspiring young actors, ensuring that her legacy lives on through the next generation of performers. It is perhaps the most fitting tribute. Irene had struggled for decades to find her place in the industry, And now her name helps others pursue their dreams in the very world that she fought so hard to conquer. What makes Irene Ryan's story so sad is not just the way it ended, but the contrast between her public image and private struggles. To the world, she was Granny, tough, hilarious, and full of life. But behind the scenes, she battled loneliness, heartbreak, and eventually devastating illness. Her life was one of contradictions: immense success and deep personal longing, laughter on stage and sorrow off it. And yet, despite all of this, Irene left behind something enduring. Every time audiences watch the Beverly Hillbillies, every time a student actor wins a scholarship in her name, Irene Ryan's spirit is alive. She may have left us too soon, but the joy she gave the world remains timeless. In the end, Irene's life and tragic end remind us of a simple but powerful truth. Fame cannot shield anyone from heartbreak or mortality. But when someone gives their heart to their craft the way Irene did, they achieve something even greater than fame. They achieve immortality in the hearts of those who love them.